from New Mexico, a state that has suffered its share of wildfires. Senator Heinrich.
Actually, we suffer our share of floods as well, because when it rains a lot, and most of it runs off, which is a hard concept to make folks here on the Potomac understand the dynamics of what causes a flood in a place like New Mexico or Arizona versus what causes a flood in the Midwest. I want to stay on this issue of building codes for a moment, because we had a huge debate in the Armed Services Committee last year around the terrible conditions that came to light within housing on military bases. And at the root of that, one of the problems was that those housing, all of that housing stock was being built to whatever the local building code was. So we have some that's built to a very high building code based on the luck of the draw where the base happens to be, and we have others built to abysmally old codes. And one of the conversations we had is, should we have a uniform code for military construction across the country? And we're certainly moving in that direction based on some of the things we included in the NDAA last year. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, the importance of having a national standard if we're going to get ahead of this, and the differences between building codes for new, what in the private sector we would call commercial construction versus the housing stock issue.
So yeah, I used to have responsibility for housing too, so I understand the dynamics. Two key points. One, we do have uniform building codes. They're called the Unified Facility Criteria, and so that governs all MILCON. Those homes are not government owned.
Right.
And so that changes the dynamics. So they don't have to build to our building codes particularly, even though we have them. They build to local building codes. They are privately owned things. I think one of the dynamics that's critical, as I observed the situation, is that they weren't getting inspected to make sure that they met those building codes. If you own a house here in the D.C. area, I have a condo rental property in Montgomery County. It gets inspected every year, by the county to make sure that I have the smoke detectors in the right places and that there's no dangers or anything like that. Why the DoD can't do that? I think that would be an important step.
Let me talk about data real quick. The Department of Defense reported last year that there are 102 installations, and on that list were several in New Mexico that are at risk of water scarcity. And as we looked at that, we also realized that the DoD and the services were approaching that from completely disparate methodologies and information sources, which fundamentally sort of calls those results into question. And we certainly had some real questions about the results of that because it wasn't where we necessarily thought the actual problems were. So Admiral Phillips, what is your assessment of the department and military services just having the right data to be able to make these decisions today based on the challenges that are before us?
Thank you, Senator. Well, from my experience and echoing some things that John Conger's already said here, the military will use the best federal data that's available. And so in the context of floodplains or projections of intensity, duration, and frequency of rainfall, which is a challenge in some areas, or the lack thereof in others, we will go to the latest information from NOAA because that's what they're there to do, rather than have to do all of it ourselves at a predictive level. The same related to floodplains, the same related to weather patterns where they're known. So I guess I would say, in my experience, we are taking advantage of this whole of government and
you would think
federal data
that
approach.
that the DoD and the Navy, for example, ought to be using the same data sets.
Yes.
They're going to make those decisions in concert. Okay.
Yes.
If I could add just a 10-second add on to that particular
Actually,
point.
you've got 33. So.
Okay. So GAO did a study of the different assessments that the services and OSD did of water scarcity. They agreed with the methodologies of the services and not of OSD. So if you're going to compare and contrast, I would value the assessments that the services did more, at least if you agree with GAO.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.